I've pressed the button, there we go. And that means that everything here on in is public domain. So please be aware of that. And here we go. So for starters, I'm going to start off with a little story which I love to tell about how I think it was my grandmother's grandmother, had a Pesach house. It was a little cottage that she had in the woods outside their village in Lithuania. And she would decamp there for Pesach. And she would subsist on a diet of matzah, nuts, and eggs and coffee throughout Pesach, which is a great thing if you can do it. But I don't have a Pesach house personally. I've got a little shed at the back of the garden, but it's not quite all mod cons. So I'm not going with that. And if you have a Pesach kitchen, then that's wonderful. It's best to have dedicated Pesach equipment as much as you can manage. A Pesach oven, a Pesach sink, Pesach services. It's all great if you can manage that, but not everybody can. So I'm going to talk through what to do if one doesn't have the capacity for dedicated Pesach things, what you can cache for Pesach, what you can't, and so on. First of all, we have to bear in mind that we're not just interested in traces of actual Pesach chometz food that we're used to. Even the taste of chometz can class as chometz in its own right. And this is a halacha worked out from various verses in the Torah. So just like you can have a meaty pot and a milky pot, so you can have a chometz pot. And if you use the pot to cook chometz, that is problematic on Pesach, and it needs to be cleansed of that chometz taste. We're going to find out how to do that shortly. And there are various other things that can have a chometz taste in them, and that can be cleansed. A few things cannot be cleansed of their chometz taste. So it's not enough in many circumstances simply to wipe something down or put bleach on it, as we'll see shortly. Especially when something is used with heat, then it's not enough just to wipe the surface. We need to go further than that. There are some things where heat is not relevant. So for example, your fridge. Fridges tend to be cold rather than hot, and same with freezers. So a fridge or freezer does not need to be kashered. It suffices simply to clean it out. I recommend defrosting it as well. Clean it out. You normally find crumbs and things at the bottom. So clean it all out, switch it on again. It's desirable, especially with a fridge, to line the surfaces of the fridge. Rachel famously mentioned in a YouTube video last year that toothpaste is a good and fragrant abrasive for cleaning your fridge. You get a toothbrush and toothpaste and scrub away. It also makes sure that your fridge doesn't have any caries, which is a wonderful thing as well. So that's for starters. Fridges and freezers and cupboards, for that matter, clean them out, just sweep them or sponge them down if you'd like, and line the surfaces as a belt and braces extra if you feel able to do so. If you can't line them, then as long as it's been cleaned down thoroughly with a brush and preferably with soap and water, you're all right. And the same is also true in principle for things like table services where only cold food is put, like a coffee table. But if you have hot food or hot drink put on a surface, then it gets a bit more complicated, as we'll find out in a moment. Let's talk about ovens and hobs. It is desirable, I should say again, to have a dedicated Pesach oven. This is not as difficult as it sounds. You can get a baby belling, which we have at home. A little thing, it'll fit easily on a tabletop, about the size of a microwave. And we just use it for Pesach. And it does make life a lot simpler and also a lot more reliable for Pesach. We don't have to rely on our cashering. We know for a certainty that it's only ever been used for Pesach stuff. There's not a trace of chometz in it. That is best practice. But if that's not possible, then most of an oven can indeed be kashered for Pesach. However, there are parts of it that can't be kashered. Here's what you do. If you have a pyrolytic oven, then that is very good in one way. You just put it on its pyrolytic setting and it goes absolutely berserk and goes to some sort of fantastic temperature. And you will most definitely get any taste in the walls out of them by simply doing that. However, you cannot keep the racks and the trays in a pyrolytic oven on that setting. They'll probably get damaged. They'll warp or melt or burn or whatever. Therefore, when it comes to racks and baking trays in an oven, broadly speaking, they cannot be kashered for Pesach. In theory, they can be kashered, but you need a blowtorch. that is very ill-advised because you'll probably damage it. And the rabbis say that if there is a worry that you will damage something by cashing it in the proper, rigorous way, you may not cash it because the fear is that you will go easy on it and not do it properly. So if you have trays, so racks and baking trays in your oven, as most people do, you can't simply heat those up to the normal oven temperature and then rely on that to make them kosher. What you should do is clean out the entire oven with Mr. Muscle or some sort of caustic cleaner. Make sure that there's no bits of food lying around, and surely the Mr. Muscle will make sure that any food that is left around will be inedible. And then put it on its highest heat for a couple of hours with the trays and racks in there. After that, your oven will be spick and span. And then in addition, because you can't blowtorch the trays and the racks, and that's really what needs to be done, you should coat them with foil. Or alternatively, put a disposable foil tray on top of them and just cook things on Pesach inside that tray. And that way you're safe. You don't have to wrap it in foil if you have that disposable foil tray there. And you can get them in the shops in Big Kosher or whatever, these big flat trays with a little rim about, I don't know, an inch high, all around the side. And you can put that inside the trays and Bob's your uncle. That does the trick. You can line, the trays were robust enough to survive several cookings. You can line it with baking paper and things like that. And that's a simple way to cache your oven. When it comes, there is a view, a council of perfection, which I raised with some controversy a few years ago, and I remember this fondly. There are those who say that you should take out the fan from a convection oven. And indeed, the London Beth Din website does recommend this. But there was a bit of a hue and cry when I last dared to mention this. And I checked with Dan Gelly, no less, and he said, if you can't take out the convection oven fan and clean it out and then replace it, it's not so terrible. Those weren't his exact words, but it's the phrase that comes most naturally to mind. And I do like to use that one. So if you have a fan oven, don't worry about removing the fan. You can get by without that. Maybe just squirt a bit of Mr. Muscle through the grill in front of the fan onto the fan. And that makes sure that any taste in there will be, most likely sorted out that way. Moving on, we also have hob tops, your gas top or your electric rings and so on. If you have a gas top, then chances are you've got these sort of, it's hard to describe. I think the word is grates. They're sort of frames that go around the gas burners, and you put the pots and the pans on top of those gas burners. So there are various ways you can cache this. First of all, just to clean them off first, you might want to, this is an idea I got from Rabbi Lister, an ingenious idea, stick them in your dishwasher. That will clean them very thoroughly. So if there's any muck stuck on the grates, that will get rid of it. But that is not sufficient to cache them for Pesach because they are used with intense heat, of course, around the gas burners. So what you need to do, in addition to scrubbing them clean, is you need to heat them up. There are various ways you can do this. One is to pass them slowly through the flames of the gas burner. I recommend using oven gloves while you do this. And if you pass each bit through the flames, that would be one way to do it. It is a laborious process, and each bit of it has to be so hot that when you touch it with a bit of paper, that paper will turn brown or smoke. If you haven't got time for that, there are other ways to do this. One is to get a blech, a big metal sheet, and put it over the burners, and then turn them on. It's recommended for safety's sake that you just do 2 at a time. So for example, front left, back right, and then front right, back left with the blech on. So the blech will reflect the heat back down onto the grates and make sure they get very, very hot. Alternatively, again, if you haven't got a blech, just get some wide pans like frying pans or big pots and put them on the burners and turn them on, and they will cover the grates, and the heat will be transmitted to the grates, and that will heat them up sufficiently. If you don't want to put the grates in the dishwasher or don't have a dishwasher, that's okay. Just Mr. Muscle them and then clean them off, and that'll be great. Rachel recommends that when you Mr. Muscle things, you put them inside a bin liner first, because that way, first of all, it stops the noxious fumes going around the kitchen. I really, really dislike that smell. In addition, it keeps the cleaning material in there, so it will work more effectively on the actual things that you have inside the bin bags. In addition to all of that, you should pour boiling water from a kettle onto the flat space between the burners, be it electric rings or gas rings. Be careful with that because it can damage the burners. And I recommend if you're going to do that with a gas top, with gas burners, what you can find is that after they've been in contact with water, if they've got an electric lighter, it will keep clicking on and on. And it can do that for months. So what I recommend is that you put rags around, I think the technical term is schmatters, and you wrap them around the gas burners before you do this, and that will stop most of the water going into the burners, and that's okay. As a counsel of perfection, if you want, you can also get a hot stone that you heat up in the flames or whatever, and sort of dab it along among the hot water on the top between the burners. But that is a counsel of perfection. If it's difficult for you to do, don't worry about it. If you have a ceramic hob with these little rings that are set just beneath it, it's quite difficult to cast that for Pesach. You can't pour boiling water on it because you'll damage it. So what's recommended, you can get this stuff called mica, which is a special sort of surface that you can put on around the burners without compromising safety. And the base bin apparently have this and can set it to you. So contact the base bin if you have a ceramic hob you want to cast that for Pesach. And then again, you just turn on the burners and Bob's your uncle. When it comes to electric and gas burners themselves, the actual burners, we talked about the grates and the surfaces, it's dead easy. You just turn them on. And once they get to full heat, you basically burnt out any taste in there and you're sorted. As a counsel of perfection as well, while they're cold, you can put a bit of Mr. Muscle on it or whatever. And that's just a belt and braces thing. But really, it's the heat that will burn out any taste in there. And that will certainly do the trick. So that is our hob tops. Just a second. Let's see what else I've got here. My little bag of tricks. Okay. Let's talk about metal things. That's largely, we're talking about sinks, draining boards, and cutlery. So metal is quite easy to cash up. What you need to do is, it's all about boiling water. When it comes to cutlery, first of all, make sure it is 24 hours since it was last used for anything hot. It may be more than that, which is fine, but not less than that. And make sure it is completely clean. So any bits of food that are on there, clean them off. Then heat up a pot. Ideally, we have a special pot for cashing. If not, then any pot that's not been used for 24 hours is fine. Heat the pot up with water and make sure the water is boiling. Then put the cutlery in. Do not put meat and milk cutlery in there at once. It's not good practice. So you bring the water to the boil and then throw the cutlery in. What will happen will be that the water will come off the boil because the cutlery will cool it as it goes in. So just wait, and then the water will resume boiling. And once it is boiling furiously with the cutlery in there, the cutlery is now kashered for Pesach. When it comes to kashering sinks and draining boards, again, make sure that they are clean and that they've not been used for hot water, for hot things in the last 24 hours. And then you simply boil up a kettle with water. And when it is boiling, you pour it out onto the draining board and onto the sink. Also onto the taps and the spout. It is a counsel of perfection also to clean out the plug hole and the spout hole before you do this. If you have a strainer over your sink plug hole, just keep it in there and that will get kashered at the same time. It is again a counsel of perfection to get the hot stone and plonk it around on the draining board and the sink. If you can't do that, it's not easy to do. Don't worry about it. It is not a deal breaker. If you have, we're going to talk about different kinds of surfaces shortly because that can get a bit tricksy. But when it comes to metal sinks and cutlery, that is the best way to deal with that. As for plastic can sort of be kasher, but it's a bit tricky. In principle, we can treat plastic like metal and kasher it with boiling water. That is okay. However, the problem with that is that most plastic things will not withstand the boiling heat that you can use for cutlery. If you put a plastic, let's say, mixing bowl into a cauldron of boiling water and leave it there to boil furiously around it, you'll probably warp it. And you know, when you get things like, I don't know, a plastic spoon, you'll get a bit of origami coming out of it, but probably not the original thing. So what you should do for plastic is fill it with, pour boiling water onto it, or put it in boiling water, preferably as hot as it can manage. And in addition, this is going to be tiresome, sorry about this, fill it with cold water, leave that cold water in for 24 hours, then pour the cold water out, put in another lot of water for another 24 hours, and then another lot of water for a third lot of 24 hours, and then it's kosher. Back in the day, people used to do this with glass as well. When glass was very expensive and hard to come by, they needed it for Pesach. So you couldn't have a bath in many homes for the week or so before Pesach, because the bath was full of cold water and dozens of glasses. You must be careful not to jump in there vigorously, because you'll just get a lot of broken glass, which is no good at all. So that's what you can do with plastic. Again, I don't think it's necessary nowadays to rely on kashrut plastic, because it is easy to buy new plastic things for Pesach, and I would recommend that. Earthenware things cannot normally be kashrut. There is a view that one can be lenient with glazed earthenware. I heard Diana and Troy Shlita say this several years ago, in extremis. But it is not desirable to rely on it at all. And I certainly don't recommend it, especially because nowadays earthenware is so easy to purchase. So generally speaking, we regard glass and Pyrex and earthenware as something that cannot be kashered. I've already mentioned that in extremis, you can use the glass, you can kasher glass by cashing it for these 3 lots of 24 hours with cold water. But again, that's not something to be relied on if we don't need to. A few bits and bobs to be dealt with just in conclusion for this section. If you've got a hostess trolley, it doesn't get that hot, so it is easier to kasher. You clean all interior surfaces, you bring it to its highest heat for several minutes, and if you've got a surface on which pots and so on are placed, cover those with silver foil. Likewise, with a hot plate that many people use for Shabbos, you clean it thoroughly, bring it to its highest heat for as long as you reasonably can, probably an hour or so is fine, and then you cover it with silver foil, in addition to covering the actual, in addition to actually cleaning the top where the things rest. If you've got pots, metal pots that you want to clean, want to kasher rather, in principle, you can put a metal pot inside a bigger metal pot, but sometimes, there's only so big your pots can get, and not everybody has an enormous vat to put in a huge soup tureen. So if you have your biggest possible metal pot, it's very simple. You clean it, make sure it's 24 hours since it was last used for something hot, and then fill it with hot water, fill it with water, bring it to the boil on the flame, and once the water boils furiously, that pot is kosher. For a counsel of perfection, what some people also do is they get the hot stone and they pour it in, so they drop it in while the water is boiling furiously in such a way that the water will boil over the top. And this is so that the top of the rim is also kashered. But again, that is not a deal breaker. So if you're worried about the safety aspects of this or the mess aspects of this, do not worry about that. That is not a deal breaker. Likewise with the Shabbos kettle, easily kashered, clean out the tap, fill it to the top with water, bring it to the boil, and Bob's your uncle. In addition, if you want to put a hot brick in it and have it flow over the top, you might want to do that. I'd be a bit nervous about that because you normally got the setting knobs and so on the outside. And if you've got lots of water streaming down to that will make me a little bit twitchy. So take expert advice if you're going to do that with your Shabbos kettle. You can get by without it, especially because by and large, Shabbos kettles aren't normally used for brewing Marmite beer and yeast. So I think you're on fairly safe ground with that one. Dishwashers. Dishwashers are fun. It is hotly debated whether a dishwasher can be kashered. My kashering book says that you can. And the only time when you can't kasher a dishwasher is when it has a ceramic or porcelain interior, because these are earthenware and cannot be kashered. Otherwise, you can kasher a dishwasher. What you do is you clean out everything, the sump, the surfaces inside, the racks, everything. Make sure it's spick and span. If there are any cracks in the coating on the rack, you need to know what that coating is made of and also what the interior is made of, because if anything is ceramic or earthenware, you can have a problem with that. Assuming it's all okay, let's say, for example, plastic over a metal interior, then that's okay. Then what you do is make sure it's 24 hours since it was last used, put it on it, make sure it's got salt in it, make sure it's got soap in it, run it through on its highest, longest setting, and then you're sorted. It's kosher for Pesach. Not everybody agrees to that, but there are those who do. Microwaves. Microwaves are an area of contention. I once asked Rav Scheinberg in person whether one can cache a microwave for Pesach. And he looked at me somewhat askance and said, we don't cache a microwave for Pesach. But I found that there are those who permit this. And if you want to take a lenient view, here's what you do. You clean it out thoroughly. You take the plate is glass, and there are many who say that you can't cache the glass. So best to replace the glass turntable plate for Pesach if possible. If not, double wrap it in cling film for the whole of Pesach, and put a glass of water in there, a glass not having been used for 24 hours itself, and then boil that glass of water for as long as you can. 10 minutes will probably do the trick, and it'll fill with steam, and then you can use your microwave for Pesach. Just a second. Anything else? Tablecloths should be washed in a washing machine. Oven extractor hoods should be cleaned. They don't need cashering. It is desirable to also cover it with foil for the majority of for the duration of Pesach. It is very difficult to clean out a food processor, so I wouldn't recommend trying to casher it. There are certain surfaces that can't be cashered for Pesach, and that is just a second. That's somewhere, just a second. Can't find it out. So you can casher things like granite, smooth marble, metal, quartz, but hardwood. But there are some surfaces that cannot be cashered, basically anything else. It is a counsel of perfection, whatever surface you can use on Pesach, to pour boiling water over it. And again, use the hot stone on it. But that is difficult and messy. We've actually found another solution for using our surfaces for Pesach, which is embarrassingly easy once you've sorted it out. Rachel, being of a more DIY disposition than me, went to MFI, a place which I would rather have all my teeth pulled out than go into. And not to do with MFI per se, it's a wonderful place, but I just hate everything to do with DIY with a burning passion. And you can get these made-to-measure surfaces, wooden surfaces that are about 1 centimeter thick, and you just place them on top of your surfaces for the whole of Pesach. They fit snugly onto the surfaces and cover every inch of the surface because it's made to measure. They can make it for you. And we don't actually bother pouring boiling water on our surfaces because there is absolutely no way that anything on the surface is going to get through 1 centimeter of thick wood with a laminated plastic covering. And it looks okay. It's a bright, white, shiny surface on top. It looks a bit like Star Trek when it's all on there. And it's really wonderful. It saves us a lot of time. We store it away in a little Pesach section all year long. And come Pesach, we just take it out, put it on, and it is really simple. And it's made our Pesach preps a lot simpler than having to deal with boiling water all over the surfaces, which is quite an onerous business, especially if you've got a floor that won't take a Pesach, it won't take boiling water. Okay, a few more things I wanted to deal with in terms of the definition of what chometz is. We know about bread and cake and so on, and pasta and cereal. All these things need to be kosher for Pesach. There are other things that are not commonly thought of as chometz, but which actually can we have to use them carefully. We should avoid even inedible things that mention on their packaging ingredients derived from barley, oats, wheat, rye, or spelt. So things like soap or shampoo that are derived from these things, best to avoid using them. Anything that comes in contact with the mouth should be kosher for Pesach. So I'm thinking particularly lipstick, toothpaste, mouthwash, and also perfume that maybe, if it's alcohol-based, it may be grain-derived alcohol, so, and likewise aftershave. So these things should be put away for Pesach and not used and included in one's sale. Even if a dog would not normally eat such things, that is not a reason for being allowed to have these things, because the criterion of a dog not eating it, meaning it no longer classed as chometz because it's not edible, only applies to something which is manufactured as food, like let's say, I don't know, a piece of bread. Imagine a piece of bread that is utterly moldy and disgusting, so a dog won't touch it. that is now kasher lePesach because it's not chametz, it's not edible. But it's something that is manufactured in a way that's never meant to be edible in the first place, like lipstick. There, even if it is not edible by a dog, the criterion of chametz is applied to it, and we should put those things away for Pesach. The London-based team have details of things that we can have for Pesach in terms of beauty products and so on, and scents, fragrances. So I'd refer to their website for up-to-date details. Finally, in terms of medication, first of all, if in any doubt whatsoever, life comes first. If there is even the slightest doubt that there is something that could be life-threatening, your life comes first, and that is that. Assuming that there is no, God forbid, threat to life or limb, then we should avoid medication that has flavoring on it, because the flavoring normally may well contain chametz. So when you have things like chewable tablets with a flavoring on them, vitamin tablets, things like this, then those should be avoided on Pesach if possible, and we should find replacements that don't have a taste. Likewise, if you have a liquid medication like antibiotics with this lovely banana-y taste, that should be avoided on Pesach if at all possible. If one must have the thing on Pesach and there is no way to avoid it, then and it has flavoring on it, then what you should do is you should eat it in an unusual way. And the way that's recommended is you get a tiny little bit of tissue paper, wrap the pill, whatever it is, in that and eat it like that. A little bit of paper will not do you any harm. And it means that eating the thing in an unusual way and it'll be okay. I don't recommend a whole wad of Kleenex. That might be a bit difficult to get down. But if just a tiny little wisp of paper, just enough to cover the thing, that will do the trick. That's all I wanted to say. We have about 10 minutes left. So 8 minutes left. So any questions, do please raise them now.
Well, it's not a question, but I've just put a link to the newsletter with the all of your commentary. So if anyone would like to look at it, then you can just get the link to the newsletter from the chat.
Thank you. That is very helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. It's good to do it in person because it's a different experience. Any other thoughts on any of this? Any questions? Any scenarios are not covered?
Hi, Rabbi Lister. It's Pamela here.
Hello.
I have a question just about the counters. So if our counters are formica, should I be pouring boiling hot water if I'm planning to cover them anyway with like those tablecloths that you get from Goods for You? You just cover everything. Do I still need to pour boiling water or just clean it thoroughly with bleach?
Okay, formica cannot be kashered.
Yeah.
It's so in fact the boiling water won't, it'll, if you only ever...
I'm saying, do you need to put boiling water underneath when you're covering anyway?
It depends. Boiling water and covering is a counsel of perfection. It's belt and braces. I'm thinking about covers that are like an inch thick and solid wood. There's no way anything on the surface will get through that if they fit snugly onto the surface and cover the entire thing. If you're beyond that, it depends on what the surface is used for in the year. If, for example, it's only ever used for cold things, then all you really need to do is sweep it. And that will be fine. It's better still to wash it down with a sponge and some washing up liquid. That will be fine. If it's used for hot things, then you put, let's say, hot pots on it and there might be spillages on it, you can't actually get away with pouring boiling water on it by itself. If you're going to put a covering on it, make sure the covering is robust, that it is not going to rip during Pesach, and that it can survive for the whole of Pesach where it is. Again, if the covering is very robust and thick, you don't need to bother caching as well. If it's just like a cloth or a plastic sheet, then I would recommend the boiling water as well. But if it's a surface which takes hot things during the year on Pesach, then that's difficult to do with formica. And I would recommend that you have a proper thick surface on top of it, or use another surface if you have it.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Rabbi Lister?
Yep.
Hi, it's Karen. I missed the hobs. I didn't miss it. My internet connection went. On the hobs, if you've got an induction hob, which is a glass hob, effectively.
Yeah.
I missed what you said to do with it. Sorry.
Okay, so the area around the rings can't be kasher. If you pour boiling water on it, you can crack it. So London Basting sells mica, which is a cutout surface, which you can, so you cut out the area where the rings will be hot, and you place it everywhere else on the top, and that way it won't compromise the functioning of the unit, but it will stop the pots coming in contact with the ceramic surface that is beyond the actual rings.
Okay, and do you clean the surface and put the rings on the highest light?
Yes, the rings themselves
Okay.
are cast simply by switching them on.
Fine.
It counts for perfection to clean it as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Rabbi Lister, it's Sanjoy here.
Hello, Sanjoy.
Hi, good morning.
Are you in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Well,
I've got
welcome.
a question.
Okay.
I've got a question for you, which is around selling of chametz.
Right.
So we have an issue where we're here in New Zealand for however long, but we also have our property in Edgware. And when it comes to the sale of chametz, how do we sell chametz when we're in one country? I mean, this could apply to people who maybe have properties in Israel, where you have 7 days versus 8 days.
Right.
How do you do, do you sell through a local rabbi, or
That's
do you sell through
question.
one rabbi?
Thank you. That's a fascinating question. All you have to worry about is where you are. So the rules that your timings of chametz apply even to your chametz in Edgware. So all you need to do is when you do your sale in New Zealand for New Zealand times, include the chametz in your home in Edgware, and that's it. That's all you need to do. And
thanks for that.
You left that home 30 days before Pesach. You don't need to come to that home and search it before Pesach. You'll be relieved to hear, because it'll be included with your bittul chametz in New Zealand. So there you go. And we wish you well, you and say hello to all the Kiwis for us. Okay.
Thanks.
A pleasure. Okay, just before I finish, I want to mention that the next in this series is at the same time, the same Zoom link next Tuesday evening. It is our wonderful Avi, who'll be sharing with us insights into the Seder Haggadah. So do tune in again for that. And then 2 weeks after that, in Chonomei Pesach, I'll be talking about meat and Pesach and a bit of Kabbalah. So you're welcome for that as well. Any more questions? Again, I've got another 3 minutes or so. So anything else, you're welcome to chime in now.
Yeah, just got a quick one, Rabbi.
Sure.
It's to do with Kiddush on Shabbat morning. Could you just quickly explain again about the rules on challah?
Okay, this is a lot of fun. Basically, the deal is that you should have lunch by 10 o'clock in the morning. It's a bit like Burlington 30, he dines at 10:30.
So basically brunch.
Yes, that's right. So we're gonna have a shacharis at some, forgive me, godless hour. And then what you do is,
isn't it, or something?
It's called 7:15, Rabbi.
Oh my goodness! And the Shabbos morning. Okay, so shacharis is really early. Then we're back in time to have effectively lunch before 10 o'clock. And you can have challah at that lunch, but just make sure it is kept away from areas that have been cleaned for Pesach already, and make sure every crumb is finished off. Don't be embarrassed to lick the plate, and make sure the chaz aren't like the whopping great big Hasidic kitkers, which take an age to finish. As long as
so, Rabbi.
Yep.
So my other question is, can you eat your Shabbat meals in a Pesach room, but have the challah in an area in another room? And just bench where the challah is?
Yes. You can bench, as long as it's in the same house, you can bench wherever you like. And even
so if we keep the challah in an area of the kitchen which is away from everywhere, if it's Pesach, okay.
Yeah, some people have the challah in the garden, and one of my sister-in-law has the challah in the sukkah, which I think is quite an interesting mix of chagim.
It's a bit early to be building a sukkah.
Well, like the menorah while you're at it.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Rabbi, good evening. Just the first point, I don't think MFI have existed for at least 10 years.
Oh, well, whatever it is.
But on a separate point, I was just wondering when is the best time to move our watches and clocks forward? I presume before Shabbos.
Yeah, you're not allowed to change. I'm so pleased to raise that. Thank you. We're not allowed to change a clock or a watch on Shabbos, even if it is mechanical, even just like a wall clock that's just a battery operated that goes round and round. You just want to move the hands. We may not do that on Shabbos Yom Tov. So basically, you have to decide before Shabbos Yom Tov: are you gonna add or subtract on the first day or the second day? and work it out, and that way you'll be safe.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Regarding the burning chametz, we burn them on the Friday, do we?
That's correct. You burn it on Friday before 11:04, but we don't say the bittul chametz after the burning until Shabbos morning before 11:04.
Right.
We have less than a minute.
Rabbi?
Yes.
I'm a bit confused about the times that you said. If are the times you've given after we put the clocks forward or before we put the clocks forward?
Or before.
Oh,
all
okay.
GMT, because BST starts on the second night of Pesach. All my times are GMT. Thank you for raising that. All right, that's our last minute, folks. Good night to Yishak Kaya. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And see you all very soon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Very nice.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.